Hi Year 11, so this is your last booster video before your final exam on Friday. So I'm going to be talking to you about English language paper 2. And we're in a really good position here because with all the other English exams done, it means we can focus on exactly what you do just for this paper. So I know what I'm about to say next might for some of you feel kind of a little bit odd in terms of the way that you are going to approach the exam, but I cannot emphasize enough how important it is for you to read through both of the extracts first before answering the questions. I know it is really tempting to just get started on answering the questions straight away, but it will genuinely save you time if you go through and read the extract first. Now, when you're reading the extracts, what I want you to think about is, doesn't have to be loads of annotations, but just little kind of comments about how the writer is feeling at any given point. So, for example, if I show you this one here, if I was to read through and I'd say, oh, the buzz of knowing I was going to become a doctor one day. Okay, so they're enthusiastic here. And then I might read on a little bit more and think, oh, actually, no, it's changed a little bit. They're not enthusiastic anymore. And actually, they're a little bit kind of feeling a sense of disappointment at this point. Or maybe they're feeling slightly disheartened. And then I carry on reading. I see actually here they're feeling quite overwhelmed and a little bit helpless. But here they get a sense of fulfillment from their role. And then do the same for source B, where they feel maybe valued, appreciated, and thinking about why they might feel that way. There's a little bit of trauma there. And I know I'm obviously racing through this because I've already read it, and you won't have that in the exam. However, the time that you spend doing this now, it will genuinely help you when it comes to understanding the extracts and the analysis that you're going to want to do later on. Each other. Okay, now the reason why I'm saying to do this is because in order to get into clear, which is our level 3, which is our kind of our grade 5 and above, we've got to make sure that we have a good understanding of the text, and we can't have any like those misunderstandings where we're getting something wrong, because that's going to really limit us from getting up into that clear. So it's really important that we do this so we understand the extracts first of all. Then, just a quick reminder that for question 1, it's going to ask you whether to identify the true or false statements, and they'll give you boxes next to the statement with a circle in, and you shade the ones that you think are correct, whether that's be correct that these are the true ones or correct that these are the false ones. Okay, so you've got to make sure you read the question carefully and also reading the statements carefully. You can't just rely on looking at one word, seeing that same word in the text and thinking, brilliant, that's right then. You've got to make sure that you're reading around each of the words that you found as well, because in terms of within the statement, because they might have maybe slightly reworded it. So you just need to make sure you're checking, because you can't afford to lose marks on that question. Okay, then we've got question 2 next. So question 2 is going to be asking you to summarise either similarities or the differences. Often it's been differences before, but it could well be the similarities. Now, in order to get to level 3 plus, so our level 3 to level 4, we've got to make sure that we have like for like comparisons. Now, even if it's asked you to talk about the differences, we can still do these like-for-like comparisons. Now, what I'm about to list might not be relevant for the question that you are given. However, it's good to go in with a bank of ideas that you can kind of rely on if needed to help you. So, for example, things that you could do to create like-for-like comparisons are the facilities. So if it's asking you to compare the differences between campsites, you could look at the facilities at one campsite in comparison to the facilities at another campsite. It could be that you're looking at the age of something, maybe the ability or the use of technology, maybe it's the size. Because even if it's a difference, you can compare the size of something, and one can be big, one can be small. So there's still a difference, but it's a like-for-like comparison. You could look at its use or purpose. And I would think about as well is like how successful it is. So they are kind of a bank of like-for-like comparisons that you could go in with. They might not be relevant. However, I think just having those in our back pocket just to kind of lean on if we need to in the exam could be worthwhile knowing that. So that as a kind of useful tip for you to go into the exam with. Question 3 on this exam, it's worth 12 marks. Oh, actually, I'm going to be really annoying here. Sorry, just go back to question 2. A reminder that there are no analysis of methods needed for question 2 at all. Okay, so essentially what you want to be doing is putting your first sentence has a keyword from the question in it. You're then going to put in your quote, and then you do this gives the impression, which suggests what? You do that for source A, you do that for source B, and if you have time, you can do another like-for-like comparison across the 2 sources. It's really important that we keep an eye on the time though. We cannot afford to spend too long on a question that is only worth 8 marks, okay? So we've got to think about doing this and moving on. Then we have question 3. So question 3 is all about language. So it's back to something quite familiar for us, and it's analysing those methods. Okay, so I'm going to just show you an example here that likely that you've gone through in class, but just to kind of reinforce those same messages, you are going to be given lines to refer to. Make sure you refer to those. You do not want to be getting evidence from outside of that. They've given you those lines for a reason. Follow the instructions that they give you. This part of the question here, how does the writer use language to, isn't going to change. It's this bit that will change. So what I want you to be thinking about is having an idea that all of your evidence connects to. So think of what is the idea, the main idea in relation to answering this question or the question that they give you. Then you're looking at your evidence that supports that. So we really want 2 to 3 quotes to support one big idea. Now, those of us that are thinking about being that level 2, so we're trying to get that grade 4, we want to be thinking about the imagery created. What is the image that that quote creates, and describe the image that is created by the quote. If you talk about the writer's use of this imagery creates, or this creates the image of, then you are automatically talking about methods. So they're going to want to credit you for that. Okay, so level 2, they are kind of those stock phrases that you can rely on to ensure that you are talking about the effects created. Those of you that are looking at pushing up into level 3, we're also going to be thinking about our words and phrases. And we're going to be wanting to ensure that we're talking about kind of 2 words from one quote or multiple words from kind of different quotes. But we've got to make sure that we're kind of building our response in that way. So we're not just looking at one word and explaining what that means and that's it. Okay, if we look at multiple words and then explain what they suggest, that is where we're going to be pushing ourselves to get up into clear. So we're going to analyse words, and then that's when your therefore, this suggests comes in. So we've got this word means this, which suggests this word means this, which suggests this, therefore, overall it suggests this, basically. Other methods that you want to be thinking about talking about with this paper, there could well be motif in there, extended metaphor, symbolism. There is more likely in paper 2 than there was in paper 1 going to be hyperbole, which is your exaggeration, your repetition, and maybe even a bit of humour in there as well, or sarcasm. So they're kind of the methods that you're going to be looking for and connecting to your idea with 2 to 3 pieces of evidence, and we're going to really go into detail with those. Zoom in on a word, what do they suggest, and how is that suggested, and then connecting that to other words and the overall, what does that suggest? That's how we're going to build through our layers of analysis. That's how we're going to build up to ensure that we're showing that we are clear, and therefore then that we're detailed. So phrases like, this idea is reinforced further by. That is demonstrating how we're going to push up into level 4 with our detail. Just using that phrase doesn't automatically mean, yep, you're getting a level 4, but certainly signpost the examiner that you're attempting to add more detail there, as long as it's all connected to that same idea. Okay? So now, question 4. And this is where our annotations around the extracts previously really come into play. So it tells us that it wants us to look at source A and source B. We have got to do that in order to get into level 3. You're capped at level 2 if you don't talk about both sources. So again, this is why your timing is so important. And if you can't see the clock in the exam hall, you let the invigilators know, because you have got to be able to keep an eye on the time, because you don't want your time running away from you. Bearing in mind, this one is worth 16 marks. Okay, so it's really important that you give yourself the time for this one. So now that we've kind of gone through the extract previously, this is where it now really helps us out and gets us working a lot quicker. So we have, imagine then, our source A, and we have source B. Okay, so what we need to be thinking about is initially, how is the writer of source A feeling? And that was enthusiasm, wasn't it? They were enthusiastic. And then we have our however. So where is the change? Initially, the writer feels enthusiastic, and we're going to analyse methods to demonstrate how we know that they're enthusiastic. But then they changed, didn't they? And they felt quite helpless. So they don't feel the same way the whole way throughout. And then we're going to analyse methods in order to support how we know that they have changed their feelings from being enthusiastic to being helpless. Now, those of you that are trying to get into that, push up to the top of that level 3 and that level 4, I want you to think about why. Why has the writer's feeling shifted? What has it kind of been the reason for that change? And that's going to help you get up into that clear and that detailed. Now, once you've done that for source A, you then do the same for source B. So you can do your initially. How were they feeling? Well, they felt valued. However, it then changed, and there was a little bit of trauma there. Okay? Now, we've got to make sure that on question 4, because this is something, and this was reported from the examiners last year as well, that what people were doing, they were forgetting about the analysis of methods. So this is where you have to make sure that you do this. You've got to analyse the methods after you're talking about how the writer is feeling and why they're feeling that way and why there has been that change. So in relation to question 4, the kind of structure that I want us to go in with and thinking about for this is feeling, analyse methods. I should have put in there initially, so that's at the kind of towards the beginning, like first half. Then, however, change or shift in feeling. It doesn't have to be a really dramatic change at all. It probably won't be. And then analyse methods. And you do that for source A and source B. And as I said before, there'll be some of you that will want to be thinking about the why. Why is there that shift? So you do initially the feeling of the writer in source A is this, analyse methods to support that. However, there's a shift when, and why is there that shift? Analyse the methods to support that, and then you're going to do the same for source B. So that's your approach to question 4. So lastly, then we've got question 5. So that is our 40-mark question. You can see here that you get marks for your content and your organisation, and you also get marks for your technical accuracy. You have got to make sure that you plan. It is so important that you plan. And actually, if you plan, and this is how important the plan is, if you plan but don't actually even write a response, they will give you marks for AO6 for the plan. Okay, so they really are trying to encourage you to do that. They mention it twice around the question that they want you to plan. Okay, so everyone is going to be starting with their anecdote. So that's a short personal story about why you have the opinion that you have in relation to answering that statement. And you're going to either agree or disagree. You're not going to do both. You will not get into level 3 clear if you do both. It has got to be one or the other. Then you want to base each of your paragraphs around different ideas. Because if not, you just end up repeating yourself and you're on a bit of a ramble. Okay? So those ideas are going to be thinking about things like the environment, as in the impact on the environment, setting, or like location. So for example, if you had a question that is about school, you could talk about the setting of the school environment. You know, if it was homework, the setting of like the school in comparison to the setting of home, and how that might help or hinder you to do homework. You might think about the money or cost of things. You might think about how class might come into that, potentially gender, age, technology, mental health and well-being. And finally, you're going to end with your morality. So the examiners have said you are only going to do a maximum of 2 to 3 pages. So I reckon aiming for around about that 6 paragraphs, maybe a little bit more, would be good for you. So you're all going to start off with an anecdote. You've then kind of got a choice about what your next 3 are going to be. Okay, you choose that from these over here. Then your next paragraph, or your like second to last one, is always going to be about your mental health and well-being. I don't think there's any question where you couldn't connect it to mental health and well-being, and I think that's a really strong kind of final argument to put forward. And then your last paragraph is going to be on morality. It's this idea of what is the morally right thing to do in relation to the statement. That's going to help you write your concluding paragraph, basically. And then you're going to have a really clear structure for it. So it's really important that we do that plan, okay? And then within that, you want to be making sure that you're following the kind of the slow writing checklist. So we've got to be thinking about varying our sentences. We've got to be thinking about our punctuation. and we've got to be thinking about our vocabulary as well, because we've kind of sorted structure with this, but we've got to be thinking of these things all of the time, and this is what's going to help to build our marks up. Okay. And then the final thing is that it could take the form of a letter, an article, or a speech. All of those you start in the same way. You start with an anecdote. If it's a letter and you're like, I am writing to you, there'll be thousands of people that start in that way. Okay, let's make ours have that really, really interesting start. Try to use that emotive language in your anecdote. Try to use humour or sarcasm if you can. I know that is an awful lot for you to try and take in, but hopefully it's just a reminder of things that you've gone through in lesson anyway. If you do have any questions or anything that you want checking or anything, please bring them to me and I can kind of help you and reassure you with that. And good luck. Just that final one to go and then you're done with English.